Welcome to Ignite Online High School. I really wish I could see you in person because I know this is kind of weird, but we're going to try to make the best of it. We're starting a new series today called Subject to Change, where we'll be talking about the one thing that all of us have to deal with in our lives right now. It's one thing that we just can't avoid, and that's why we need to learn how to handle it well. What is it? Well, before I tell you that, I want to tell you a quick story, mostly because I love embarrassing myself. This is a story of a change that happened back when I was in high school. Back then, and even into college, sports were everything to me. I played basketball and soccer and ran cross country. And when I say I ran cross country, I mean I ran. I was the star freshman runner, and I was the top female my freshman year. I was running 5K races in under 20 minutes. In under 20 minutes! I don't think I could run that fast now if my life depended on it. But the whole school took notice. Everyone knew how fast I was, and honestly, I really loved the attention. My freshman year, I missed going to state by 7 seconds. I was devastated, but I still had 3 more years to make it, right? Well, I trained hard that summer. I ran almost every single day. But when cross-country season rolled around again, it became obvious to myself, my coach, and the entire school that I was slower. What had happened? Well, I had done everything right. I had eaten well and trained every single day, but what had happened was what happens when you're a teenager. My body had changed, and I had gotten stronger, but stronger meant heavier, and heavier meant, well, not as fast. It was incredibly frustrating, and I felt helpless, mostly because this was something I couldn't control. Remember, I had done everything right. But I still wasn't able to control this change, and it had ruined my chance of going to state in cross country forever. But the changes that my body went through between freshman and sophomore year are actually exactly the changes that allowed me to excel at soccer the rest of high school and eventually get a college soccer scholarship. The change that had been so devastating ended up being a great thing for me, but it doesn't always work out that perfect. And to be honest, I don't know if this change with everything going on with the pandemic is going to work out that perfectly either. Maybe you haven't experienced a change like I did back then, but I'm sure you've experienced some kind of change in your life. I know you are all experiencing changes right now. We have all experienced change before, and we all will again, even after we get past all this. That's why we're going to spend the next 3 weeks talking about change. So let's kick things off with a subject everyone is really into. Are you ready? Terms and conditions. Okay, actually, they've probably never been on your mind before, but you've definitely seen them. Well, sort of, even if you didn't realize it. You know, when you download an app to your phone or computer, you always get a pop-up message asking if you agree to their terms and conditions. That's what terms and conditions are. It's that pop-up that pops up. So when that pops up on your phone or computer, do you read it? No, you don't. No one reads it. And so we do what everyone does. We select agree and we move along. Why? Well, they can be crazy long. Instagram's terms, for example, are 5,000 words long. Fortunately, one lawyer decided to read through Instagram's list and spell out their terms in plain English for those of us who aren't lawyers. Here are a few insights. Ready for this? Other people might pay us to use your pictures, but we won't actually pay you. That's one of their terms. This is another one. We may randomly delete your posts. How about this? We can force you to give up your username for any reason. And finally, we may share your personal information with other companies. So to sum it up, Instagram sounds like a total creeper. But here's the kicker. All of these terms, they're not set in stone. The terms are subject to change. In other words, here are the rules. Here's how we do things. Got all that? Okay, great. By the way, this can all change tomorrow. And that's kind of weird, right? Instagram made the rules, but they may have the right to break those rules. They want it both ways. Not cool, Instagram. See, it's not just the terms and conditions in apps that are subject to change. All of our life is subject to change. and you've probably experienced that before. It's obvious when you think about it. We all have terms and conditions, or expectations for what we think life should look like. And then one day, life completely rearranges things on us. It breaks the rules and it does the unexpected. This pandemic is the most unexpected thing we could have ever imagined. It broke all of our expectations. Change can be a good or a bad thing. For example, maybe you made the team this tryout, but you're not a starter. Okay, you'll take that life change. But shortly after making the team, you got injured. Not a great life change. Or maybe you just found out you're moving, and you're pumped because you didn't have many friends at your own school, and you're kind of looking forward to a fresh start. On the other hand, maybe you found out you're moving and it's the worst news possible. You love your school and your friends there. Either way, life pulled the change card. Or maybe your body went through some changes, kind of like mine. Upside, you're taller. Bad news, acne. Welcome to your teenage years. Maybe you've made one of the best friends you've ever had. Or maybe you lost a really good friend because of a misunderstanding that can't seem to be fixed. Maybe you have an awesome new dating relationship. Or maybe you were hit with a breakup that totally blindsided you. Change can be awesome or awful. But either way, I think we all struggle with it for a couple of reasons. Are you ready for them? The first is that it forces us into the unknown. I know this has for me. Moving to a new town or a school could be an awesome experience, but we don't know yet. Changes don't arrive with a guaranteed set of terms and conditions. So until we know how things work out, it can be pretty stressful. We can also lose perspective. Change can be emotional. In fact, if it's a big enough change, it can feel like it's the end of the world. I know I've felt that way. Finally, it also causes us to realize that we're not in control. We never have been. If you think about it, we spend a lot of time and energy trying to control our outcomes. We study so that we can have good grades. We practice our sports and our instruments so we can be better. We take the right electives so we'll get into the right college. We do everything we can to avoid arguments with our friends or our family, especially family right now. And although we never really have control over our lives, we feel it more deeply when we're in the middle of a change, like this one. And since all of us are subject to change at some point, we're all subject to realizing that we can't make everything in life fit into a nice, perfect box, even if we try really hard to do that. And so the question we need to tackle isn't how do we avoid change? Because we can't. Change is going to happen, but it's whether we are ready for it and whether we can handle it well together. How can we make it through change? That is the real question. And of course, the Bible has something to say about this. God has something to say about change. And what the Bible says can actually comfort and carry us through anything that life throws our way. But before we get there, let's get some backstory. Thousands of years ago, in a land far, far away, no, I'm just kidding. Thousands of years ago, God chose a group of people, the Israelites, to be his people. And although God is perfect, the Jewish people obviously couldn't behave perfectly. This story should sound pretty familiar. Despite all their imperfections, God still wanted them to live differently than every other people group in the world. So he gave them a set of laws on how to live great lives while setting themselves apart. It started with 10, which we call the 10 Commandments, but it eventually became 613 laws. Yeah, that's a lot of laws. They had laws for just about every single part of their life. What to eat and what not to eat. What to wear and what not to wear, and not just the TV show. And how to worship God. It's kind of crazy to think about all of those laws, right? Some of those rules for worship stated that only certain people could enter the inner part of the temple, which was like their church. And only a smaller, more elite group could actually experience God's presence. So the rules for worship were very rigid. Fast forward a few centuries to when something revolutionary happened. Guess what? It's Jesus. God entered the world as a real flesh and blood person, Jesus. And he shared the amazing truth that his love wasn't just for the Jewish people, but his love was for the entire world. And then, after being put to death and demonstrating just how great his love was, Jesus came back to life. That's what we celebrated on Easter. And when Jesus defeated death, it changed everything. It was a game-changing, history-making moment. But then Jesus left the world. And once life returned to somewhat normal, the Jewish people who had become followers of Jesus were really shaken up. See, their religion, which they had faithfully practiced every single day for generations, went from 613 rules to one relationship. Did God's laws have terms and conditions? Were these rules subject to change? To say they had concerns was an understatement. So a letter was sent addressed to them. It's called Hebrews. It was written to Jewish people who followed Jesus. And while we're not sure who wrote it, the author clearly had a deep understanding of God's plan for his people and mankind. As the letter is ending and the author is writing his final thoughts, he makes this statement. He said, "Don't love money. Be satisfied with what you have. For God has said, I will never fail you, and I will never abandon you." Let that truth sink in today. That may seem like a weird thing to hear, but it made sense at the time. Being a Jewish Jesus follower back then wasn't easy. One of the changes that came with following Jesus meant that they were in danger of losing property and money every day. You could lose everything by following Jesus. But even with the scary threat of potential change like that, the author reminds Jewish believers of something they already knew to be true, because they had heard it all of their lives. God would never abandon or fail them. That was a promise that God had kept since the Garden of Eden till now. Basically, the writer is saying, hey, a lot is changing. I get that, but God's character hasn't changed at all. And that's kind of what I want you to hear tonight. A lot is changing. I get that, but God's character hasn't changed at all. The writer continues. A few verses later, he makes a similar statement that I think could help all of us when we're facing a life that is subject to change. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus doesn't change. Jesus had changed the game, right? Jesus himself had not changed. He was the representation of the same God that these Jewish people had been following for centuries. He was the same God that they had followed since they had first encountered him. Sure, the way they lived and worshiped was changing in a major way, just like the way that we live and worship is currently changing in a major way. Instead of following hundreds of rules, they were now free to simply follow one person, Jesus. So that means worship, no more rules about who could go where in the temple. Experiencing God, his Spirit was now available to everyone. Sacrifices, in one move, Jesus became the singular, permanent sacrifice for everyone's sin. No more animals had to die like they did in the old system. To us, those changes seem awesome. But to the Jewish people at the time, they were really unsettling. Remember, in the middle of change, you have no clue how things are going to turn out. Just like we don't know right now how things are going to turn out. That's why the writer of Hebrews reminds the Jewish believers that even though a lot is changing, they could trust that Jesus himself does not change. He wasn't some random guy showing up to break their system. He was the same God who was present when the system was created. He created the system. And that's a big deal because they had a history with God. They'd experienced ups and downs with him. They had experienced God's faithfulness through tough times in their past. And the same God they, or their ancestors, had trusted in the past was the same God they could trust now. Their circumstances had changed, but God's character hadn't changed one bit. Just like our circumstances have changed, but our God has not changed. They hopefully learned something huge, something that applies to you and me today. Life changes, but God doesn't. Just think for a second about how freeing that is. Because while everything around you is subject to change, and it makes you feel out of control, you can walk with the one who is actually in control. Jesus is a friend who never, ever changes. He was good thousands of years ago, and he's still good today. Your circumstances will change, but his character never will. The best way to remember this truth is to keep it in front of you. And here's what I mean. If any of you have done ballet or you've ever done dance lessons before, you'll be familiar with this concept. Dancers obviously move and spin a lot, but they have a trick that helps them stay stable and balanced. They find a section of the wall they're facing, and as they're dancing, they keep looking at that one spot. Otherwise, they'll get dizzy and disoriented. This focus helps them stay balanced in the right direction. The same is true of an ice skater when they do those crazy spins that give you motion sickness just by watching them. I used to be able to do some of those, fun fact. They keep their eyes on a single spot. You have to stay focused. So even though it looks out of control, they remain stable and upright. The same idea holds true for us. Life moves fast, and things can change quickly, which makes it incredibly easy for us to feel out of control. And when that happens, and we shift our focus to our problems, things feel even worse. We can let our anxiety get the best of us. We tend to forget how God has shown up in the past, and as a result, we lose perspective. It's important that we stay focused on the one who can stabilize and keep us balanced, especially during this time. So how do we do that? Because I know it's easier than it sounds, or that it's easier to say than to do. If you think back, I bet you can remember a specific time that God came through for you. Think about it. Maybe it was when your family didn't have enough money and you prayed for help to get through it. Maybe he was there when a dating relationship ended and he helped you survive. Maybe he's helped calm your anxiety from time to time. Maybe he has answered a really important prayer for you. I want you to take some time to think through your past and come up with a few specific memories of how God stayed the same when life changed. Once you remember that moment or time when he showed up, I want you to write it down. And then I want you to keep it in front of you, just like dancers do. Stay focused. Doing this reminds you that God has shown up in the past, and it will encourage you to know that he's still the same today, even in the midst of all these changes. So write it down. Then put the note in a place where you will see it daily. Like maybe you can put it on your bathroom mirror. You can put it on the dash of your car. You can put it in the Notes app on your phone. It may sound or feel lame, but seeing those reminders every day will help you see things clearly when life feels like it's spinning out of control. It will help you to remember how good God is and how his character, who he is, never changes. Listen, change is going to happen. It's happening right now, and it will happen in the future. Sometimes it will be a good change, and sometimes it won't. But even though life is unpredictable, we can always trust in the one who is predictable. Life changes, God doesn't. He's the same loving God that he has always been. Think of some areas in your life where you can begin to lean on this reality. Maybe it's at home, in your schoolwork, or in a relationship. Because you can't avoid change, but you can make a way through change. Because even though life changes, Jesus doesn't. I can't wait for you guys to process some of these discussion questions with your small group and with your parents, and I hope that leads to a lot of fruitful discussion. I am praying for you guys and thinking of you. Love you. Bye.